When was a time in your life where you stayed too long? Maybe you overstayed your welcome, or maybe you let something in your life overstay its welcome. I was out on a hike earlier this week with a bunch of guys, and one of the guys planted a question and a verse that has just stuck with me. He brought us to Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 6. It's at the end of the story of the Israelites traveling through the promised land. And they come to a point where they are now 40 years in. They've been staying at this mountain for a long time, and God is wanting them to move out and to go and take the promised land. And so Moses comes and tells the people here, he says, "The Lord our God said to us, you've stayed long enough at this mountain. You've stayed long enough at this mountain. Now break camp and advance." What is the mountain that you've stayed too long at? Is the question that was posed to me on Monday. And that question, it just hit me on so many levels. I mean, there are sin issues in my life that I've let reside in me for too long. And God is calling me to advance, to conquer them, to overcome. I thought of just Him calling me on to some new ministry opportunities and things that are uncomfortable, and I'm stepping out in faith, and I can't see that next step in front of me, and it makes this guy who's pretty type A and cautious a little unnerved. But I know that God is saying, you've stayed long enough at this mountain, and I'm calling you to advance into some new ministry opportunities that I'm calling you to. And so there are these different layers in my life, whether it's things inside of me or things outside of me and my circumstances, where I know I've stayed too long, or at least long enough. And God's calling me, challenging me to keep moving, to keep pursuing Him, to keep pursuing freedom and wholeness and forgiveness, to pursue new opportunities to help others in different places know His grace and salvation. And so when I heard that question, what's the mountain that you've stayed long enough at? We were at the base of this little mountain that we were hiking around, and I just had a vibrant picture that the Lord was calling me to advance. And so here's the simple question for you today. If God were to bring you this verse and say, you've stayed long enough at this mountain, break camp and advance, what is the mountain that you've stayed too long at? Is there something in your life that has laid claim? Maybe it's a sin issue or an addiction, some form of bondage that you need to break free of or pursue healing and forgiveness and wholeness, that you've let it be a part of your story for too long. And God's saying, don't stay there any longer. Break camp and advance. Maybe it's a job opportunity for you, where God's calling you into something new and scary, and you don't know what it looks like to follow, but you just sense that God is calling you, saying you've stayed long enough at that mountain, break camp and advance. Maybe it's a challenge in your life to advance into new hobbies, or not hobbies for fun, but opportunities to serve Him and use your gifts and skills to see others know Him. What is the mountain that you've stayed long enough at, or it's stayed long enough in you? And where is God calling you next? What's He calling you to? My friends, it is exciting and it's scary to step out in faith and to follow God. The Israelites from this point, they spy out the land, they end up going and moving into the promised land, and there is a promised land ahead of you in the same way. Now that doesn't mean there won't be challenges and battles to fight to get in there, just like there were for them. But will you trust God today enough to follow Him to that next, whatever that next is, that next freedom, that next wholeness, that next opportunity to see Him glorified in your life? You've stayed too long at this mountain. Break camp and advance. God be with you today.